We have kids who are struggling with anxiety, depression, self-harm, these problems at a higher rate than many. It comes and goes, but this is a very high rate of these crises.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not that our kids are broken or we're broken,
Yeah.
or that they're just hypersensitive. It's that we're trying to contend with this world.
Most of us have been taught to think of anxiety as a problem. But what if anxiety is not the enemy we think it is? And learning how to work with it is actually one of the most important skills we can help our children develop. Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Bren, a clinical psychologist, mom of two, and the host of Securely Attached. In this podcast, I'm joined each week by leaders in the field of medicine, psychology, psychiatry, and child development. And together we translate the science and research into easy to understand and actionable parenting insights. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Tracy Dennis-Tiwary. Tracy is a clinical psychologist, researcher, professor of psychology and neuroscience, director of the Emotion Regulation Lab at the City University of New York, and author of the best-selling book, Future Tense: Why Anxiety is Good for You, Even Though It Feels Bad. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, NPR, the Washington Post, and the BBC, and she is widely recognized for her research on anxiety, emotion regulation, and mental health. In this conversation, Tracy challenges one of the most common assumptions parents hold about anxiety, that it is something we should try to eliminate as quickly as possible. Instead, she explains why anxiety is a normal and even valuable part of being human, and how our efforts to protect children from discomfort can sometimes get in the way of the very skills we hope to help them develop. Together, we explore what it looks like to support children through fear and uncertainty without reinforcing avoidance. We talk about how parents can become a source of calm in difficult moments, and why learning to work with anxiety may be far more powerful than trying to make it disappear. Tracy also shares a practical framework that can help parents respond to anxiety both in themselves and their children with greater confidence and clarity. So whether you have a child who struggles with anxiety, or you simply want to better understand how to support your child through fear, uncertainty, and life's inevitable challenges, this conversation offers a perspective I think every parent needs to hear. Hello, Tracy. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Hello, it's so wonderful to be here.
So today we're going to be talking a fair amount about anxiety. And I think maybe the best place to start is to sort of maybe talk a little bit about the difference between like anxiety, the emotion, versus anxiety like as a diagnosis or an anxiety disorder. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what anxiety itself actually is and what that emotion is doing for us versus it being conceptualized exclusively as a disorder.
Right. Thanks. That's a great big one to start with, but I think it's exactly the right place to start with. Because as we'll talk about today, I wrote a whole book really about addressing that question. Because anxiety, the emotion, which is like sadness, anger, joy, anxiety, the emotion, we've mixed it up, we've conflated it with anxiety, the disorder. And so we know that anxiety feels really bad. It's actually, I think, it's the unpleasant emotion we hate the most, possibly. And for good reason. It does feel terrible and it sucks. And the thing about feeling bad is that doesn't mean that we're on the path or have a disorder, even when we feel really, really anxious. So let me talk a little bit about the difference and how we know the difference. First of all, with anxiety is on a spectrum. So when we think about anxiety, we might think panic attack, but really, we're probably feeling little signals of anxiety every day in our lives in very common ways and very useful ways. So on that spectrum, you have intensity, right? So you have little butterflies in your stomach when you're getting ready to do something that makes you a little nervous, and all the way to full-blown panic. That's the spectrum. But what anxiety prepares us to do, and why I called my book Future Tense, is to anticipate an uncertain future, right? Where something bad could happen, but something good is still possible. and to be energized and focused to do something about that future that's uncertain so that you can avoid the negatives and avoid disaster, but work and be kind of bring all of your gifts, your skills to bear on making that positive possibility into reality. So, for example, if I'm nervous about being on a wonderful podcast and I'm feeling a little butterflies in the stomach, that's a great thing because that means that my body, maybe my heart is pumping a little faster because it's sending, oxygenated blood to my brain so that I can think and focus even better, right? It's maybe there's a little bit of adrenaline. We also know that when we're anxious, we actually have spikes in oxytocin, which is the social bonding hormone. So actually that nervousness, as I'm about to speak to you on a podcast, for example, might be priming me to find points of connection. So all of these things are happening because, yes, this podcast could go terribly and I could forget everything. And we could really be like, oh, this is not a great conversation. That's the bad that's possible in the uncertain future. But it could also be a wonderful conversation where it's, really exciting and interesting and fascinating. And so my body and my mind preparing like that for the future allows me to do my best in that situation. Mm-hmm. That's why we evolved to be anxious. I think it's a crown jewel in the, the evolutionary kind of gifts that we have as humans, because it allows us to do things like, instead of think of prehistoric people and, maybe they're sitting around they've just discovered fire and maybe they got some food somewhere, and they're sitting around the fire and they're so comfy. And if you don't have that little bit of anxiety, right, to say, I saw some mountain lions in the caves the other day that I was hanging out with, maybe I should, sit around here and build a shelter for myself instead of going back to that cave. Like that anxiety, that discomfort, it prepares us to do something really important. And I'll end with this and take a breath and let you react. And the flip side of anxiety is hope. Because when you're anxious, you're not in despair. You have not given up. Mm-hmm. When you're anxious, you actually are prepared. You're in that space between where you are now and where you want to be, and you're driven to make that positive, mountain lion free reality. Yes, make it into reality. It's mobilizing. Yeah. So I think of anxiety, the emotion, even when it's painful and uncomfortable, and we have to really work through it and with it, it is still our ally, even when we have to negotiate with it. Mm-hmm. So that's the emotion.
Yes.
Now we can talk about anxiety disorders, which are real, which are not advantageous, like the emotion of anxiety. It's when our anxiety ceases to work for us, or when where there's a mismatch between the amount of anxiety that we have, either, it's always a combination of external sources, our own sensitivities to the world, when there's a mismatch between our ability to work through that anxiety and to manage it and to tolerate it, right? So when we see signs of that mismatch, I think of it as kind of 4 big red flags. One is that anxiety is experienced as too strong, as it's too intense. It lasts too long. Right. So, and we can, of course, when we think about our kids and anxiety, we're trying to look for this too, right? Like what's normal mm-hmm. anxiety? What's that? So you see your child maybe struggling with school, like, okay, is this a too intense of an emotion? And it's not just a week or two. It's week after week, month after month. It's just lasting too long. It doesn't fit. That's the third criterion in a way, that it doesn't fit with situations. So it makes sense to be really anxious about a test, and maybe you have to work through that. But are you also being anxious when you're with friends that you already know? Are you also anxious in situations that are safe and helpful? So is it out of context, some of this anxiety? And then, and this is the most important one, and this obviously as a clinician, I'm sure you think about this all the time, does the experience of anxiety and how we're coping with it get in the way? Mm-hmm. That's the functional impairment. So are we chronically avoiding situations that are causing anxiety, so much so that we're not going to school, we're missing exams? For adults, are we disconnecting from our community? Are we missing work deadlines? So that's the way we're contorting ourselves to deal with that intense, long-lasting, out-of-context anxiety, blocking us from the good things in life. So
Yeah.
that's really and it's not always easy to know, right? The difference,
Right.
right? So
Because
I
they are
always tell parents,
connected.
go for help. Yeah, go for
Right.
help if you have any question, but they're all connected.
Right. And it's the first thing you described is just the emotional experience. And I'm curious too, as you were describing it, I'm like, is there in the body of research that you've done, do you differentiate anxiety and arousal? Or are we just talking about the same thing? Or is it qualitatively different?
Arousal is a very general purpose term. So you can be aroused and angry. You can be aroused and joyful, right? So it's like that's a dimension of emotionality. So you have
Mm-hmm.
arousal and valence, right? You have the kind
Yes.
of orthogonal. You have the quadrants where you can say, oh, I can be high in arousal, but also high in positivity for the valence
Mm-hmm.
dimension, right? Arousal is distinct from anxiety, and anxiety as an emotion. If you take a functional view, each emotion. This is also very evolutionary and functional emotion theory, which is a very popular theory in psychology, really takes an evolutionary perspective, which is that every emotion gives us the opportunity to understand the world, to appraise it and what it means for our well-being, and then it creates an action readiness tendency to
Mm-hmm.
react, to be, to make our lives better. So anger is the appraisal that there's a obstacle to something we want. And the activation is that it helps us to work to overcome that obstacle, right? So that's why
Mm-hmm.
the biology and the thinking that goes along with anger is very overcoming, right, and persistent. Anxiety is the appraisal that we have a future that's uncertain. And or that we're ruminating on that uncertainty that happened. But mostly
Mm-hmm.
anxiety is a very forward, you can ruminate and drive anxiety, but it tends to be rooted in this future uncertainty.
Yeah.
And
Something bad is
the
going to happen, or this
yeah.
something isn't going to feel good. I
Mm.
won't be able to handle whatever is going to come. I don't know what's going to come.
Precisely. That's at the heart of the
Mm-hmm.
emotion of anxiety. And this is where we forget the action readiness tendency. And this is where it really, you have the information that's so helpful, right? Because when you have the action readiness tendency, it is that something bad is going to happen, but the good is still there. And that's the thing we forget. You are not anxious about a test if you think there's no chance that you'll do well.
Mm-hmm.
You would despair. You would be
Right.
sad about that test. It's a different. So what anxiety tells us is that we're still in it.
Yes,
We
it's still
still care.
mobilizing
Yeah,
until I suppose it hits that threshold of
exactly.
becoming so overwhelming that it blocks and we
Yes,
freeze. We basically shut down or avoid. And that's maybe the despair you're talking about, but it could also be like almost like I just dissociate, like I turn off.
exact. I mean, precisely, and that's where it's that's that mismatch I talked about, where the
Mhm.
degree to which where the anticipation of the future and our feeling that we don't have what it takes to still create a future that feels good or that's safe,
Mhm.
right? And when that mismatch, what you have left over often is avoidance, because now in the moment you're just trying to make yourself feel better. It's this overwhelming feeling you want to escape from. And as you know, I mean, the key problematic kind of factor in anxiety disorders across the board is that chronic and rigid avoidance, and
Yeah.
you lose flexibility. And that's when it starts going down this road towards an anxiety disorder.
Right. I always say like this anxiety at the level of a disorder makes our world small. Like it
Mm.
really like that's one of the things I'll like kind of use to describe when I'm trying to evaluate, a kid or a family member. Is it like a question I'll often ask is like, does their world feel like it's shrinking?
That's
Um,
so great. I love that. Yeah.
yeah, because that
Yeah.
because that often will capture that threshold, right? Like once you move it out of okay, anxiety being functional versus it being non-functional, it makes us, to your point, like when it's functional, it's mobilizing. It can make us continue to persevere when things feel really overwhelming or challenging, or we're not sure how it's going to happen, how it's going
Yeah.
to play out.
Yeah.
But it's actually mobilizing. And I remember like there's like this inverted U of anxiety
And
to
stress. So it's the
yes.
same kind of inverted you. Yeah.
Yes, right? Too little anxiety, and we're like, whatever. I'll
I
study
know.
tomorrow.
We need it. We need it. Yeah.
Right?
Unfortunately, we need it. Yeah.
I am. It's funny because my sister and I were very close, and we have very polar opposite ends of like our anxiety thresholds.
Yeah.
Like mine is a little too high. Like can procrastinate right up until I need a lot of anxiety to mobilize me.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
usually has to be like, I got to get right up to the edge before I feel it light up that mobilization.
Yeah.
Whereas my sister was like, it takes so little. Her threshold for anxiety is so low. And so when we were kids, I was all, because I have ADHD and she's a little OCD. And like when we were kids, I'm older, so I would drive us to school and I was always late. I did not care about being on time. And she's just sitting there like white knuckling, like, we're going to be like, she would like throw up before every test. Like it was, we were just like so incompatible to like be
you
like.
You guys are on the spectrum. It's so fascinating, actually.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure not easy. But I love that you have this beautiful relation. I mean, it seems like I have a feeling you probably have a great relationship with your sister today. And I think that's you know, you say that, you know, getting smaller and like, is that, you know, that's the threshold when you as a parent have that instinct, because it's so hard in this sort of parenting industrial complex of too much parenting advice, you stop trusting your instinct. And I love that guideline of, you know, if you can see, even if your child's struggling, they're still getting out there and they're trying and you're supporting, you're working through it. It's like, okay, yes, see a therapist, get support, but you're still kind of on that path. And that's a path all of us have to develop through. But if your child's life, your life has shut down and choked, and actually I'm a super nerd, so I'll just throw this out here. If you look at the etymological roots of the word anxiety, of course, there's the Latin anxietas, right? But you go back even further to I swear to God, the Proto-Indo-European, and it comes from the root ung, A-N-G-H, which if you even say that sound, ung, it means to choke. It means to choke. And so that shutting downness and the kind of shrinking that can happen with anxiety, especially when it gets in the way, I think is at the core.
Yeah. And so that's a great segue, because you just brought up something that I wanted to ask you about, because I've heard you talk about this before and I found it so interesting. The kind of the history of not anxiety conceptually, like as a construct, but the history of the human meaning making of anxiety, like how language has evolved to describe anxiety, how different cultures over time have made meaning out of these sensations, and how that's changed, because it's somewhat of it is a physiological, hardwired biological construct, right? Yeah. And our relationship to it is a bit culturally informed, it's evolved, and it might have become highly distorted at this point in our current iteration of it. And I would love to just let's nerd out. Like, can we just talk a little bit about
you never have to ask me twice.
Yeah. We're in good company.
Well, great. Thank you for wanting to nerd out with me too. I mean, it is fascinating because, you know, as a clinical psychologist and a researcher, you know, until I wrote this book, I didn't really go back and think about that, because we take it for granted, right? It's just like anxiety. It's one of the, you know, Freud talked about anxiety in his introduction, really his work's introduction to the United States. It was in a book that was, the English translation was, you know, anxiety and the role that it has to do in our inner lives. But the history goes back so much further. So, you know, if you look at, you know, I have a little less knowledge, and I'm not even sure if there is scholarship about non-Western you know, language around anxiety. So that I'll just put that aside. But if you look at sort of medieval era, you know, how we started using the word anxiety in European languages, it used to be a very rarely used word. It really just described, as you were saying, physiological, these kind of physical sensations. So if someone used the word anxious, it really just meant, oh, my heart's racing, or I have butterflies in my stomach, or, you know, maybe the kind of panic feelings that can happen. And it wasn't until the Catholic Church really started being a dominant force in European life in the medieval era that anxiety went from being this very external experience to an experience that occurred in the soul. So you start seeing this language, and of course there was, until writing became, widely available and reading was a common thing. This was all from the pulpit, right? This was this was sermons, and these were churches, and there was this notion that we had a sickness of the soul, an anxiety of the soul that feared hellfire, and so it became this very internal and sort of morally colored emotion that was frightening, right? And it was really
ever present,
and sort of this threat from beyond. So
because it's not just I noticed this sensation, and here it is, and like all sensations, it comes and it goes, like, and we're in fluid motion all the time. So when it stays in that land of sensation, there is this innate, I would imagine, if you're paying attention, this trust that it comes and it goes. Yeah. But when it's now connected to like your existential soul and your morality and who you are and what you do, you could, and the bar was pretty high in that moment in time as to what was good and what was bad. And it was also quite black and white. And so I would imagine there's just a tremendous amount of ever-present incongruence with what I'm supposed to be doing and how I am, and therefore I'm in conflict.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think that was a slow burn, because still it's, I don't think, I'm picturing this. I don't know this for sure. I'm not a scholar of medieval peasantry, but I'm thinking of people, they would go to church, or they would have and you don't have time, or you're just kind of surviving. So you're not thinking about it all the time, but it set the stage, I think, for exactly what you're talking about. Because, if you look at certain kind of scientific and philosophical iterations, so you kind of, all of a sudden you have this ever-present thing that's internal and you can't escape it. It's not as passing anymore, right? And it somehow links you to the eternal. Okay, that's intense, right? And then you have philosophers like Kierkegaard, for example, about 180 or so years ago, wrote an entire book about anxiety. And he was a Catholic, which is interesting. He took this different perspective. He said, whosoever learns to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate. So there are all these beautiful quotes from Kierkegaard about kind of what I'm saying. I mean, I'm just ripping off Kierkegaard, really, but he's sort of saying, it's sort of this, if you can, it's not that the ultimate is that it goes away, because maybe it never goes away, as you were just saying, but it's like, how can we be anxious in the right way? And he called it the dizziness of freedom, of this existential freedom. So now, after you move out of the medieval dominance of the church and you're in kind of the Enlightenment era and a little beyond, now all of a sudden you don't have all the church lost some power. All of a sudden, humans are at the center. People are questioning the infallibility of the church. And now you don't really have a true north anymore. You just have this soul that maybe it's, I think it's there. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's physical. You're starting to question all these things. But you have this anxiety that seems very powerful. And you can't just hand it over to the church or to God anymore, right? You can't. So now you have this all uncertainty. Freud comes along, by the way, and Darwin was in here talking about anxiety. He wrote a whole book about, a third of his theory on evolution is about emotion. So people were trying to scientifically wrap their head around, but then Freud comes on the scene, and he's like, actually, neurosis, which is just like another way of saying anxiety, that's central to everything that's wrong. and we like become crazy, and now it's like there's physical forces, but there are these now super powerful emotional forces that are causing us to go blind, because it's right, because your alarm, and whole societies are going crazy because of this powerful emotion. So this is the stage for the 20th century, right? So now we have the new, we're the new, I hate to say it quite this way, Sarah, but I think it's true. We're the new sort of priests and kind of spiritual advisors of the soul now, because, for those who maybe don't have a spiritual life, they turn to psychologists, right, to tend for their soul. And now we're talking about anxiety all the time. So our mindset, the story, our relationship is what you said, I think so aptly, to anxiety, is that it's this incredibly powerful force. It causes a lot of dangerous things to happen. And if we don't know what to, if it feels out of our control, which I feel like a lot of the social media dialogue, like modern dialogue, is sort of like anxiety is, I'm spiraling, I'm taking over, it's controlling me, it's my anxiety that, my identity is anxiety. I think we have a mindset now where the house is on fire, you feel a little anxiety, you're in danger, and you better run, which means avoid. And
Right.
what were we already talking about is
Yes.
the actual recipe for problematic anxiety? Avoidance. So I think
Right.
we're in this relationship with anxiety. I think we should break up with that relationship with anxiety. I think we need to not break up with anxiety and treat it like an enemy. I think we actually need to find a way to negotiate and make anxiety our ally again.
Hey, jumping in real quick because I wanted to share a resource that you may find helpful. One of the most difficult parts of parenting an anxious child is figuring out how to support them without accidentally making the anxiety bigger. When your child is distressed, it's completely natural to want to offer reassurance, make accommodations, or help them avoid situations that feels overwhelming to them. The challenge is that sometimes those well-intentioned responses can unintentionally reinforce our child's anxiety. And that's exactly what the SPACE program was designed to address. SPACE, which is an acronym and stands for Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions, is a research-backed treatment developed at the Yale University, and it helps parents learn how to respond to anxiety in ways that build confidence, resilience, and independence. And one of the things I love most about SPACE is that parents do the work. Your child does not have to attend sessions, and in many cases, parents can create really meaningful change simply by learning how to shift their own responses to their child's anxiety symptoms. At Upshur Brun Psychology Group, we offer a couple different options for getting started with SPACE. Our 4-week virtual SPACE group helps parents nationwide develop a deeper understanding of childhood anxiety and OCD through the lens of the SPACE treatment model. Over 4 weeks, you'll learn the key components and strategies that make SPACE so effective, gain clarity on the role parents play in supporting change, and leave with a framework you can begin applying within your own family. For parents who want a more personalized level of support, we also offer one-on-one SPACE sessions for families in New York State and Connecticut. This option allows parents to work closely with a therapist to tailor the approach to your child, your family system, and your specific challenges, with ongoing guidance as you learn, adjust, and implement these principles in real time. As Dr. Ellie Leibowitz, the creator of the SPACE treatment modality, shared with me on Securely Attached, childhood anxiety is one of the most treatable conditions in the field of mental health. The work you do now can create lasting change that benefits your child across their entire lifetime. If you're interested in joining the waitlist for our next SPACE group or getting one-on-one support, you can visit upshurbrun.com/space. That's upshurbrun.com/SPACE. Or if you want help determining what support options are best for your unique family's needs, you can also schedule a free 30-minute consultation call with a member of our concierge care team who will listen carefully to your concerns and walk you through personalized recommendations so you don't have to figure this out on your own. All right, now back to my conversation with Dr. Tracy Dennis-Tiwary. Something you said feels so important to me. And I know you do a lot of work in like the tech space too, but you're saying, okay, anxiety is this internal and external inputs, right? Some sort of cues for threat, uncertainty, lack of control. And if the amount of that coming at us then causes an outsized response that is also mismatched with our belief in our ability to cope with what we can handle. So it's like a recipe. It's like if you're trying to, make lemonade, you've got water, sugar, and lemons or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, you need to have balance. Then it's good. Otherwise, it's too sour, it's too sweet, it's too watery. The balance is optimal. But we also are like, the problem is not necessarily the balance. Yes, we want to find the balance, but we're also in a world where like people are just throwing lemons and sugar and water on us. Like it's just dumping on us all the time. So the input is also outsized. It can't, like, we can't keep up because the world we live in this moment in time is just so inundating with cues constantly, a never ending barrage of it. And so it's like, we might have fairly adequate capacity to believe in our ability to cope with anxiety. We might have a generally decent ability to modulate the intensity of it. But the fact that the inputs are just beating down on us everywhere we go, it's like, well, we're still going to be high anxiety then.
I am so, so happy you brought this up, because we went down the nerdy path of talking about what is anxiety and why you can make it your ally and it's a mindset, blah, blah, blah. And the total reality is 100% what you're saying, because this era between, technology is going to amplify anything. And we are already in this age of anxiety, of uncertainty, of change, right? Because anxiety is about uncertainty, right? Of things being too fast, too much, all the pressures to, I heard your talk about, with Mattering, and Jennifer Wallace. And that was a fascinating talk. And just it's never enough, the constant pressure. So this is this world. And I really I'm just so glad you said that, because I make the mistake of not leading with that issue to say, this is a world that almost none of us could actually match with it in terms of right. Just naturally being able to, this is like super easy and I'm just going to not be, and so I really want to say that it is we have kids who are struggling with anxiety, depression, self-harm, these problems at a higher rate than many, it comes and goes, but this is a very high rate of these crises. Mm-hmm. And it is not that our kids are broken or we're broken, or that they're just hypersensitive. It's that we're trying to contend with this world. Yeah. And the reason I come back to what we can do about our mindset, what choices we can make as parents, how we can kind of be in the basement with our kids with that suffering and not making it trying to make it go away or snow plowing over it, because that's not going to work in this world of throwing lemons and mostly lemons, but some sugar too, and definitely drowning in water. So I guess, as we work to change our environments, and we can use our anxiety to do that work, right? I think we have ourselves, our families, our communities, like things we can do and choices we can make to help make that match better. And I think a mindset about anxiety, as painful as it is, I believe it can help us do that and really help our kids do that too. So, but I'm so glad you put that all in context, though.
Yeah. I think that the mindset allows us to stay. Yeah. Having a mindset, if you can say to yourself, this is safe. This is uncomfortable, but it is safe. There's utility here. There's information here. There's positive elements to anxiety. It's safe. That allows you to slow down and stay present instead of running away or turning off or avoiding. So that's critical, because we can't fix any of the amount of inputs coming at us or our coping strategies or our regulatory response. We can't downregulate. Those are like the three, like the inputs, the arousal, and the okay, I can handle this. And so I'm gonna
those are the levers we have. Yeah. Those are the levers we have in a moment.
But we can't work with any of those levers if the experience of anxiety or watching our kid experience anxiety is so overwhelming that it shuts us off.
I agree with all my heart. And I think that was the motivation behind my writing this book, because there are tips. And I think if we want to end with some tips for parents and just kind of a simple, I kind of give a simple framework because there's so many tips out there, but you need a roadmap. And so I try to keep it really simple. But the whole reason I wrote this book is like one giant recalibration of our mindset about anxiety. Yeah. For that reason, because if we can start to see, listen, don't love your anxiety, don't even like it, but honor it as an essential part of our humanity and a potential ally. Because as you said, it's only by making it an ally that you can do all the other things you need to do and to help your kids do to navigate this world. And when you do, it can be a superpower. And it doesn't mean that there aren't anxiety disorders and people need to be supported and helped. And it does not mean that. This is really an and, not a but.
Exactly. I think, I mean, like you were saying before, anxiety is on a spectrum, and like that spectrum includes, just non-disordered and disordered levels of anxiety, right? So it's still the same system we're working with.
And it includes excitement. It includes hope. So yes, it's the same system, but it can go off the rails.
Yes. So, okay, let's think about it. Well, I want to hear your framework, because what I'm thinking about is now I'm thinking about these 3 levers. Like, okay, we can intervene on the level of input. We could try to reduce the intense, like, slow that deluge.
Yeah.
And I think for kids, parents really need to scaffold that, because they don't know how to hit the brakes in the exposure to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not possible, but like where it's possible, slow things. Like I'm always like, I got off like I stopped getting my news from a certain place. Like it's like sometimes you have to curb the volume and the breadth of access you have to all this noise, because
it's not even social media anymore. It's just a giant strip mall and digital space.
It doesn't matter. It's like you can't walk down the sidewalk without it coming at you. But input. So there's some place in the level of input that we could intervene. There's some place in the level of managing our arousal, just physiologically regulating the system. Mm-hmm. And then there's some place on that end of like believing I can handle, trusting my capacity to cope, increasing my tolerance for the uncomfortable sensations and feelings and thoughts. Is that match your framework, or do you have, like, I'm curious how you think of it and what we could give parents in terms of like for themselves or for helping their kid to just feel like, okay, I've got some tools in my toolbox.
Yes. All of what you said, I'm 100% behind. I created a slightly different framework because, really it's a framework for creating this more hopeful anxiety mindset. Right. So, and it includes, the framework is, and I think you'll see, so it's sort of that first step, but it also includes actions you can take. So I call it the 3L framework, and it's what you do when anxiety shows up for your kid, for you, and because you don't know what to do. And there are a million tips, right? But it's like putting gas in your car and you have no idea where to drive. The 3 L's are just like, here's a little roadmap and anxiety shows up and here's where you can steer your car. So that's what it is. And the 3 L's are listen, leverage, and let go, in that order. So the listening part, and it's the most important part, so that if you don't do anything else, you listen. This is the point at which you just fully see, validate, and accept that child's experience of the emotion. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree with it or amplify it, but it's just that taking that moment that I'm sure you talk with every parent you work with and anyone who's really trying to be there for their kids, where you say, okay, you're having this feeling. I'm with you. Can we give words to it? Maybe not. Can I just sit with you while you're having this feeling? We don't want to fix it. We're pausing on fixing and soothing. We're just really abiding with our children. And what it does, it's like a miracle when you really, and it doesn't happen overnight, but when you can really practice providing, and this is for your kid, this is for your loved ones, this is for yourself, really taking that emotion for a minute, that anxiety as information that has something useful to tell you. Mm-hmm. You're only anxious when you care, so it tells you about something you care about. We do know when we name it, we tame it. So it is helpful to give words to those feelings, but we can't give them to our children. We have to really listen. Sometimes it's not even a word.Maybe it's what color is this feeling? How does it feel in your body? What happened right before you had that feeling? So helping our kids tune into that feeling. So I've just sat with, I have a son and a daughter who are teenagers now. But there have been times when my husband and I we've had a kid come home really overwhelmed. It's been a terrible week. You want to talk about it? No, that's like pro forma. And we just say, hey, do you mind if we just sit with you? Tell us when you want us to go away. Can we just sit? whatever, but you sit there and then 5 minutes have gone by. They haven't asked you to leave yet. 10 minutes has gone by, 15. And then maybe there's just a little, you've created the space where they know it's okay to feel this way. They don't have to perform for you. And you open the door. And over time, that can really, that's the only thing you do, right? Not fixing their child. They're not broken. That, so I can go on and on about this. I'll stop there, but it's just that experience of deep acceptance and abiding with the feeling. So once you've done that and you've listened to it, and maybe you can see a little bit about what anxiety has to tell you about what you care about, what's possible, then you try to leverage it. That's the second L. So listen and then leverage. And leverage means you actually, for example, if you're worried about a test and that's what's, the kid is like, I'm going to fail math. Instead of avoiding that, you lean into it a little bit and you say, okay, what about math? Are you anxious about? There's this great, I'm sure you've probably done this with clients before, you schedule worry time. Mm-hmm. And there's actually great evidence that if you schedule worry time right before a test and you let a kid dump all their worries about the test for 10 minutes before the test, they actually do better on the test. So, and that's work that was published in the journal Nature, which is one of the great journals. But it's just this idea that when you don't fight and try to suppress the worries, you actually gain control of them, right? Mm-hmm. So you actually lean and say, okay, you're worried about the test. What is it? I'm going to fail. Well, what is it that you don't understand? Well, there's that one type of algebra problem that just gets me every time. Oh, okay. Well, could you ask your teacher for, to actually just could we just do practice on this one type of question? Or, oh, my friends they're not going to talk to me. I mean, friend anxiety is so deep and wide and it's hard to solve, right? But just by having listened to anxiety about the friendship, you'll figure out, oh, okay, well, you're worried that one friend who's been really mean to you is going to turn everyone against you. What can we do is there some move you can make now that allows you to, make a choice that's going to help you in this moment? So it's like that listening and then knowing it's giving you information that you can leverage to do something with. Mm-hmm. That actually allows anxiety to be useful in the way of and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it takes time to leverage it. But it gives you that concept that you can actually do something like a wheelbarrow, like that's a lever, because a wheelbarrow allows you to lift things that you could never lift on your own. It just gives you that opportunity.
Yes.
Because you've owned that anxiety.
Right. But if you don't listen first, which I think I hear your very valid and very useful criteria that you must go in the correct order, because if you don't listen first and you just want to leverage the anxiety before hearing what the real message is, because initially anxiety can show up as this kind of like spray paint. It's everywhere. It's nowhere. It's everything. It's not like, it's just this big cloud of something. Exactly. And so being with, letting it settle, really listening for the true nugget of this is the actual seed of this. This is the fear. It's honoring that. Yeah. It's honoring that feeling. Yeah. And the other thing, too, is I think this is the biggest thing we do. And, I have two teens, as I mentioned, and they've had struggles with anxiety. And you can imagine how, what my feeling about that might've been too, that I'm supposed to be the expert on anxiety. Right. But what this, and they've been my teacher in this. I mean, it's been so profound for me to see my own kids struggle. And to really see, the biggest problem I caused and where I have grown as a human, as a mom, as a psychologist, I think, is to realize that inadvertently I was trying to fix my kids. They had struggles. I went into fix-it mode. Here's the worksheet. Here's the thing. Here's the psychology tip. Mm-hmm. And the whole world, which is full of psychology tips, is telling us, you got to fix your kid. Do this, do that.
And it's wrong. Our kids are not broken machines. Listen, our job as parents is to help our children suffer, not to take it away, because the nature of life and the nature of mental illness and health is if you can find a way to experience all the feelings and to sometimes suffer and to fall down and pick yourself back up again, that's mental health, not happiness. Yeah. So, but we're all falling prey to this mindset of fixing something that's broken. Anxiety is not broken. But sometimes we have to navigate it and tune it and leverage it, right? And then before we let go of it, which is the third step, which we can talk about in a second, right? After you react.
But it's I think it's not. It's anxiety, our child who's anxious, us who's anxious, that's not broken. We don't have to fix it. But it's also not, I could see a lot of people be like, yeah, I think I realize I've been thinking it's been broken and I have to fix it. But also, it's not dangerous. I don't have to make it go away.
Correct.
That is, I think, for me, what most people go, oh, okay, wait, that one, I did think it was dangerous and it needed to go away.
Yeah.
And so if it's not dangerous and I can sit with this discomfort, or it's not dangerous and I can sit with my child's discomfort, I'm not failing them as a parent because I'm letting them be in this not dangerous, uncomfortable space.
It is so hard.
Because it's so contagious, right?
And we can tell ourselves, by the way, we mental health professionals, we might be like, yeah, that's the way it is. And I'm going to teach all you people how to do it. And then you face your own child's anxiety and you realize how incredibly hard that is. But I am going to promise every person who is listening to this that if you can tolerate your own distress about your child's distress, you will become an anchor to them.
Right.
That will be you will build trust in ways that you could never do before if you allow yourself to be more flexible and work on your own ability to feel that pain. And of course we want to protect our kids, but you are not protecting them by trying to make them not feel these feelings. They are not fragile. They are anti-fragile. The only way our muscles grow stronger when we strain them, and our emotional strength, our well-being, that grows stronger only when we allow ourselves to feel these feelings, because you're going to deny your kid the ability to grow stronger if you try to take those feelings away. It's the terrible truth. It's the terrible truth, but it's true.
I know. And I can't help but sneak in a little attachment thing, because the way you're talking makes me think of like a secure base, right? Like if you want, like we know that secure attachment, a healthy attachment relationship between parent and child is is tied to so many positive outcomes. And it's also very, it's in part predicted by how much of a secure base we're able to be for our kid, because when our kid is in distress, when they are anxious, which again, they will be, one of the things that they are going to do to self-regulate in that moment is look at you. Like we were evolved to do that. Our kid falls down, they'll look at you before they know if they're going to cry or not. They're saying, I trust your cues more than I even trust my own. I go to you. And if you are meeting their gaze, they fall down, they scrape their knee and they look at you and they're like, wait, am I okay? I'm not asking myself, I'm asking you. And I'm not doing it with words. I'm doing it with like unconscious, like scanning of your facial cues and your threat response. If you are looking at them from a place of compassion, but calm, sort of reflecting back the safety of the situation. Oh, you went down, huh? Ouch. Yeah. I'm here. Just wait, not saying much, just letting them now go into their own system and actually check for the cues of pain or fear or what. And I'll often say when my kids were little, I always would say whenever they fell down, I was like, did that hurt or did that scare you? Or maybe both. Like, that's, you weren't expecting that. Like a lot of it is the shock, right? Not just the pain. But again, just our ability to sort of be that secure base and to reflect back to them the safety in their emotional experience.
I think if we think about every time our kid comes to us with anxieties, fears, distress, overwhelm, if we just picture exactly what you said, just be that safe base. Just, you're accepting it. You're not denying those feelings. You're not trying to fix them. You're not trying to say, oh no, don't worry. Don't say, and it comes out of every parent's mouth, including don't worry. But if we can we can always make amends. We can always repair. Repair is the most important part of parenting. We can always say, wait a second, tell me more about that, and be that secure base and just visualize that. I think that's half the battle. That is half the battle. And it's like, it's the overused, the only way out is through, but it's another one of those cliches that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'll end in 30 seconds with the let go part, the third L. So it's listen, right? Really being that secure base, leveraging, doing what we can with that information, because emotions are information, and then letting go. Not the first thing, which is what we want to do. And by letting go, I don't mean avoiding, although sometimes, listen, we're going to binge watch our Netflix. If you're me, you're going to have a bag of salt and vinegar chips. You're going to do, once in a while, we're going to avoid our feelings. But if we can habitually let go in the sense of like we ride waves, like sometimes, emotions are a wave, and there are ways that we can sort of enter the flow of our lives in very positive ways that lets us release those emotions. And it's hard work, right? Leveraging, listening, leveraging. And we already know how to do this. It's not rocket science. Being in community, sports, arts, watching a family movie together, meditating. Yes, that's a really hard version of it, but we already do all of these things. I think community is one of the most underrated ways of letting go, because we evolved to, as you were talking about with the gaze, like when we're, the checking in with from infancy to parents to give that information, we evolved to be in the tribe, to seek support from the tribe, and to work through anxieties and fears. And so drawing on that community, whether it's spiritual or just giving something back, or just being with friends and family. So all of those ways, we have to remember to fit them into our lives after we do the hard work of listening, leveraging, and then we can let go.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. This was so interesting. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I imagine people listening got so much out of this. So I know I did. So I really appreciate it.
I did too. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, well, I will hopefully talk to you again very soon.
I hope so. Thanks again.
If you enjoyed listening to this conversation, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts and your feedback with me by scrolling down to the ratings and review section on your Apple Podcast app, or whatever app you're listening on, and let me know what you think of this episode or the show in general. Your support means the absolute world to me, and just a simple tap of 5 stars can make a real impact in how this show gets reached by parents everywhere. So thank you so much for listening, and don't be a stranger.